Welcome to the deep dive. I'm so thrilled you're joining us today because we're about to plunge headfirst into a topic that is, well, as old as humanity itself, yet constantly evolving: the art and science of understanding deception. Now, you might think you know how to spot a lie, right? Maybe you've heard about eye movements or nervous fidgeting, but what if we told you much of what you've heard is just, maybe a lie itself? Today, we're cutting through all that noise. We want to give you a truly practical, scientifically backed understanding of human behavior when it comes to truth and lies. We're diving deep into the incredible insights from a fantastic source, the Deception Detector Series by the self-aware guy on Telegram. Seriously, this author has truly immersed themselves in the neuroscience and psychology behind truth and lies. It offers such a fresh perspective, way beyond the pop culture myths. It's going to be a fascinating journey, I promise.
It really is. And what's striking here, I think, is that we're moving beyond just anecdotal observations or gut feelings. Our mission today, really, is to equip you with an understanding that's grounded in how our brains actually work and how deception manifests not as a single obvious tell, but, as a complex interplay of cognitive processes. It's about becoming a more astute observer, not some detective in a trench coat looking for a smoking gun.
Absolutely. We're not about pointing fingers here. We're about understanding the human condition and maybe acknowledging how incredibly common deception actually is. So to kick things off, let's just acknowledge something universally. Well, true. Lies are everywhere. I mean, did you know, according to some studies, about 60% of people over 18 can't have a 10-minute conversation without telling a lie? Think about that for a second. It's like you could be talking to someone right now and they might have already bent the truth twice.
It's quite astonishing when you really look at the data. On average, adults tell about 3 lies every 10 minutes. Now, it's not necessarily malicious in every single instance, but it highlights just how ingrained deception can be in our daily interactions. It's just a pervasive aspect of human communication, really.
3 lies every 10 minutes. Wow. That's like what? A lie every 3 minutes and change? And get this. Parents are often the primary victims. A whopping 86% of lies are told to them. Ouch. I guess kids really do learn from the best, don't they? But seriously, that statistic alone shows how common lying is, even in our most intimate relationships. It's not just some distant theoretical concept. It's happening all around us all the time.
And what's truly fascinating here is that the capacity for deception isn't exclusively human. Not at all. If we broaden our scope beyond our own species, we see very similar survival strategies at play across the animal kingdom. Think about camouflage. That's a masterclass in deception, isn't it? It allows animals to seamlessly blend into their surroundings, either to evade hungry predators or to lie in wait, ambushing unsuspecting prey, a form of visual trickery, basically a biological lie to the senses.
So, like, a chameleon isn't just changing color for fun, it's literally telling a visual lie about where it is. That's clever.
Precisely. And birds. Some birds are incredibly clever. They might feign a broken wing or some other injury to distract potential threats away from their vulnerable nest. They're essentially sacrificing their own perceived safety to protect their offspring. It's a calculated act. And you have primates. They've been observed using some pretty cunning strategies to mislead other members of their group, maybe to get exclusive access to food without competition. All of these examples really illustrate that deception, in its broadest sense, is a fundamental and ancient survival mechanism. It's deeply rooted in evolutionary history.
Okay, so it's clear deception is ancient, like a survival instinct woven right into the fabric of life. But when we turn our gaze specifically to humans, our approach to detecting it has undergone its own massive evolution, far beyond what Hollywood tells us, right? For ages, when we thought about lie detection, we probably pictured things like polygraphs. You see it in movies all the time. Someone's hooked up to wires, and if their heart rate jumps, bingo, they're lying. But our source material, the Deception Detector Series, tells us there's a whole new world opening up thanks to science. It feels like we've been looking through a keyhole, and now we're about to swing the whole door open.
Indeed. Historically, our understanding of lie detection was, well, pretty rudimentary. It relied largely on these somewhat crude physiological indicators, changes in heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, or even skin conductance, which basically just measures how much you're sweating. The underlying assumption was always that lying caused stress, and that stress would manifest in these measurable bodily responses. However, modern neuroscience has truly revolutionized this field. We now use advanced neuroimaging techniques like functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, and electroencephalography, or EEG.
Okay, just to make sure we're all on the same page here, what exactly do fMRI and EEG show us? Are they sort of like high-tech brain cameras?
That's actually a pretty good way to think about it, yeah. fMRI, for instance, tracks blood flow in the brain. It shows which areas are more active at any given moment, essentially highlighting the working parts of the brain. EEG, on the other hand, measures electrical activity directly on the scalp. It gives us a real-time window into the brain's computations, down to milliseconds. These technologies allow researchers to directly observe brain activity as it unfolds during the act of deception. So this isn't about simply correlating sweat with deception anymore. It's about identifying the specific cognitive and emotional processes happening inside the brain itself. It's like we've gone from merely reading the smoke signals to actually understanding the fire itself, seeing the internal mechanics.
That's wild. So what really happens inside our heads when we decide to bend the truth? Because it sounds like it's not as simple as just, making something up on the fly. It's actually a pretty intense cognitive workout, isn't it?
It absolutely is a real workout. And the star player in this cognitive gym is the prefrontal cortex, or PSC. You can think of it as the brain's manager, or maybe the gatekeeper, located right behind your forehead. This region is absolutely crucial for things like clear thinking, making decisions, controlling impulses, planning, all the high-level stuff. Now, imagine you're about to tell the truth. That's usually the path of least resistance, the automatic response. Your brain defaults to it. But when you decide to lie, your PFC has to step in. It actively blocks that truth from coming out, it suppresses it, and then, almost simultaneously, it has to construct and replace it with a believable lie, often right there on the spot.
Wow. So it's like your brain is doing two massive things at once, holding back the default truth while building a whole new believable story. No wonder it takes so much mental effort, like trying to pat your head and rub your stomach while also reciting the alphabet backward. That's a serious multitasking challenge for the old gray matter. NIDA research shows this, right? Increased PFC activity during lying.
Oh, consistently. Yeah, study after study shows increased PFC activity during deception, indicating that extra mental work is definitely happening. So that's a key insight. Lying is a demanding cognitive task, not just a casual thought. It requires your brain's top-tier executive functions to pull off.
Exactly. And it's not just the PFC working in isolation, it's like a team effort. Other brain regions get recruited to support this elaborate performance. The temporal lobe, for instance, plays a vital role. It helps retrieve past experiences and generate mental images, which is crucial for giving the lie detail and realism, making it sound more authentic. The PFC then uses working memory, the brain's ability to hold and manipulate information in the short term, to organize all this information and make sure the story sounds logical, consistent, and fits the current situation.
So it's like your brain's own clever screenwriting team, pulling bits of real memories and pure imagination to craft a convincing yet totally false narrative. It's assembling a composite image rather than just pulling up a single pre-existing file from memory.
That's an excellent analogy, yeah. And this lying committee within the brain involves several key regions orchestrating the whole thing. Beyond the specific parts of the PFC, the dorsolateral and ventrolateral bits, which are the main orchestrators suppressing truth and generating the lie. Another critical player is the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC.
ACC.
This is often called the brain's internal alarm system. It shows increased activity when someone is lying because it's spotting problems. It's handling the conflict between what they know is true and what they're choosing to say.
Whoa, so even if you don't consciously feel guilty yet, it's like your brain still registers the lie. An internal mismatch detected alert is going off. That's fascinating.
Absolutely, it picks up on that conflict. And then we have the limbic system, which is essentially the emotional engine room of the brain, and specifically the amygdala within it. The amygdala reacts intensely to perceived threats, whether it's the threat of getting caught or just the internal conflict of being dishonest, or maybe the potential social fallout. When someone first tells a lie, the amygdala tends to fire up, sending out strong warning signals, feelings of unease or guilt. But here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a little concerning. When people lie repeatedly, especially if those lies are for personal gain, the amygdala's reaction actually weakens over time.
Weakens?
Yeah, it's as if those initial warning signals of guilt or unease just get quieter and quieter. Brain scans consistently show this desensitization happening. And this weakening of the brain's emotional brake on lying makes it progressively easier to tell more frequent and even bigger lies down the road.
Wow, so it's like those first pangs of conscience just fade away. Imagine a small lie is like sliding down a really gentle hill. At first you feel a little bump, maybe a slight jolt of, ooh, should I be doing this? But if you keep sliding, the bumps disappear, and pretty soon you're on a much steeper, smoother slope. That's your brain adapting. It stops giving you those little internal nudges, making the next lie feel less burdensome. That's the slippery slope everyone talks about.
Yeah.
Which leads to a kind of chilling insight. The more you lie, the easier it gets. Your brain literally gets desensitized to the emotional discomfort.
Precisely. That's a very good analogy for the slippery slope phenomena.
Yeah.
And perhaps surprisingly, research has actually found that telling the truth can feel better physiologically than lying, even when the reward for either action is exactly the same. Our brain's cortical reward system, also known as the mesocortical limbic system.
Okay, the happy part.
Yeah, the happy part. The part that lights up with pleasure using dopamine, our feel-good chemical. Brain scans show the system gets more excited, it shows a greater response when we're rewarded for truth-telling compared to lying.
Huh. So it seems we're kind of wired to appreciate honesty on a fundamental, maybe even neurological level. Our brains genuinely get more satisfaction from it. That's pretty cool. I mean, who doesn't want more dopamine flowing?
It is cool, which makes the choice to lie even more intriguing, doesn't it? And while honesty might be the brain's sort of default setting, sometimes telling the truth, especially about others, can be quite tricky. It's not always easy. This is where something called theory of mind comes, and our ability to kind of step into someone else's shoes mentally, to anticipate their reactions and feelings. This skill is crucial even for honesty, because we often have to navigate how to deliver a difficult truth without causing unnecessary harm. And that takes thoughtful brain power. Deciding how to say something truthful but potentially hurtful, or admitting a mistake that makes us look bad that all takes significant mental effort. So truth-telling isn't always thoughtless. It can also require a bit of brain power, weighing the impact and consequences. And it's also worth noting briefly that certain personality traits and mental health conditions are linked to an increased tendency towards lying. For instance, individuals with narcissistic personality disorder might use lying as a tool, maybe to seek admiration, reinforce a sense of superiority, or manipulate others. Similarly, those experiencing anxiety disorders might resort to lying as a sort of maladaptive coping mechanism, like claiming illness to avoid a social gathering that triggers their anxiety. The motivations behind deception are truly complex and really multifaceted.
Wow, that's a lot going on in the brain just for a simple fib. Okay. So we've looked at the how in the brain, at the mechanics of it, but now the classic question: why? Why do people lie in the first place? What drives us to put on that mask? Our source material, the Deception Detector series, breaks down beautifully into some core motivations.
Indeed. There are several powerful motivations that come up again and again. First, there's self-presentation and social approval. A huge driving force behind lying is simply the desire to manage how others see us and to gain their approval. Research indicates people are more inclined to lie when they're trying to appear more likable, more competent, or just generally more enjoyable in social settings.
Right, like when you might exaggerate your success on social media, maybe add a few extra exclamation points to make it sound better, just to fit in with what you think others will admire, or maybe telling a new date you love adventurous sports when really you just want to stay home. It's all about crafting that perfect image, isn't it? Trying to look good.
Exactly. Another primary motivator is self-protection and avoiding negative outcomes. This is a big one. People frequently resort to deception simply to evade punishment, prevent embarrassment, or escape other undesirable results. A common example here might be a student claiming they forgot their homework when actually it wasn't done.
Been there.
Or maybe an employee feigning illness to avoid a particularly tough day at work. In high-stakes situations, that instinct for self-preservation can become a really powerful catalyst for deceptive behavior.
Yeah, I think we all probably have a story or two about trying to dodge something uncomfortable.
Then we have protecting others and maintaining relationships. This is often called pro-social lying. Here, the main intention is to benefit other people, maybe spare their feelings, or just maintain social harmony. For example, complimenting a friend's new, but maybe unflattering haircut to avoid hurting them.
Or pretending to love that weird gift your aunt gave you.
Exactly. Expressing delight over an unwanted gift. And interestingly, some studies suggest gender differences here. Women tend to tell pro-social lies a bit more often, perhaps reflecting certain societal expectations around nurturing and supportiveness. And finally, a very common motivation: achieving personal goals and advantage. People also lie tactically to gain money, resources, power, influence, or just to benefit themselves directly. Think of someone hiding income to pay less in taxes, or maybe manipulating others to get what they want in a negotiation. These reasons are sometimes lumped under egoism or hardness motivation, covering that desire for advantage, control, or self-enhancement. Lying, in this context, becomes a strategic tool to navigate social situations and reach desired outcomes, sometimes even involving deliberate exploitation.
Right. So it's not always about malice. Sometimes it's just about making life smoother, or at least appearing to. Now that we understand why people lie, let's talk about the different flavors of lies, because it's definitely more than just simple black or white, isn't it?
That's right. The source material outlines several categories, which is really helpful. We've already touched on pro-social versus selfish lies, which is about the intention helping others versus helping yourself. Pro-social lies, as we said, are generally seen more positively. Then there are white lies. These are probably the most common and, frankly, socially accepted form of deception. They're minor untruths used to smooth over social interactions or protect someone's feelings, like, again, complimenting a gift you don't actually like. They can be altruistic, where the liar might even take a small hit, or Pareto, where maybe both people benefit a little. They really play a big role in social cohesion and just basic politeness. Another common type is exaggerations. This is where you stretch it to the truth, make something sound bigger or more important than it really is.
Making a good story great.
Exactly. It can be as simple as slightly spicing up a story to make it more entertaining, or maybe greatly inflating one's accomplishments. And here's something interesting. When someone exaggerates a lot, they might actually start believing their own exaggerated version of events. There's a term for it. Fabrication inflation. Whoa.
Yeah. And you see this a lot online, right? Where people use tons of emojis or repeated punctuation to emphasize or exaggerate their feelings, partly because you don't have body language cues.
Oh, I know a few people guilty of that. All those extra exclamation points when something is just fine. It's like, this is amazing, when really it's just, yeah, this is okay. It's like digital puffery.
Digital puffery, I like that, precisely. And then we have lies of omission, also known as concealing. These happen when someone intentionally holds back important information, even if everything they do say is technically true. The problem is, by leaving out key details, they lead the other person to believe something that isn't the full picture.
Like a salesperson raving about a car's features, but conveniently forgetting to mention its terrible repair record?
Perfect example. People often prefer these types of lies over outright falsification because they can feel easier to morally justify, I didn't actually lie, and they're usually harder to catch. Research suggests they're often seen as less dishonest. In contrast, you have lies of commission, or falsifying. This involves directly saying something that isn't true, a flat-out untruth. This is a more obvious way to deceive, like making up an excuse for why you were late for work. These are generally seen as more dishonest and more morally wrong than lies of omission. Now, a particularly cunning form is embedded lies. This is where false information is cleverly woven into a story that is mostly true. People telling these lies often use real past experiences or factual details as scaffolding, which makes the untruth seem much more convincing. It's especially hard to spot embedded lies because the surrounding truth makes the false parts appear credible. And studies indicate most people tend to use embedded lies rather than inventing a completely fake story from scratch. It's easier, less cognitive load. And finally, we have paltering.
Paltering is a distinct form of deception where someone tells the truth, but intentionally creates a misleading impression. This is done by very carefully choosing true statements that guide the listener towards a false conclusion.
Ugh. Politicians are often masters of this, aren't they? They'll tell you something that is factually accurate, but it's framed in such a specific way that it makes you think something entirely different, usually something more favorable to them, like saying, I always put the people first, which is technically true in some abstract sense, maybe, but misleading if they just voted against a popular bill that people wanted.
Exactly. And while those who palter might believe their actions are more ethical because they are technically speaking the truth, research indicates that if their deception is exposed, they face judgments just as severe as those who tell outright lies. The negative backlash when it's discovered really underscores that the intent to mislead, even through technically true statements, is considered a serious betrayal of trust.
Okay, buckle up, because now it's time for some serious myth-busting. We've all seen the polygraph on TV, right? The classic lie detector. Hook someone up, ask a tough question, the needle jumps, bam, caught red-handed. So, what's the real story with polygraphs? Do they actually detect lies?
Well, the short answer is no, not directly. Polygraphs don't actually uncover truth. They simply trace the body's stress signals. The whole foundational premise is that deception causes a physiological stress response. This involves the autonomic nervous system, or ANS, specifically its sympathetic branch, which governs the body's fight or flight reaction. This gets activated during stressful moments. And this activation leads to increased arousal and those measurable shifts in things like heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, and skin conductance, basically sweating. And you mentioned things like blushing or going pale earlier. That relates to vasodilation and vasoconstriction. Vasodilation is when blood vessels widen, like blushing from embarrassment. Vasoconstriction is when they narrow, making you look pale from fear or anxiety.
Right.
These are just visible manifestations of your ANS reacting to stress. They are not, in themselves, direct indicators of a lie. A rise in blood pressure during questioning suggests heightened sympathetic activity, sure, but it absolutely doesn't automatically mean deception.
So, relying solely on whether someone blushes or goes pale to spot a liar, that's just not scientifically sound. You might just be labeling someone who's honestly nervous as deceptive. It's like saying because someone's heart is pounding after running upstairs, they must be lying about where they were. It's drawing the wrong conclusion from a normal stress response.
Precisely. And that highlights the key limitations of the polygraph. Physiological arousal is simply not specific to deception. It's a blunt instrument. Arousal can be triggered by a whole range of factors. Anxiety about being interrogated in the first place, a general fear of consequences even if innocent, or just plain old nerves. This frequently leads to false positives where truthful, innocent people are incorrectly flagged as deceptive. Conversely, practiced liars, or maybe just people who are naturally calm under pressure, can sometimes consciously or unconsciously control their physiological responses. This leads to false negatives, where deception goes completely undetected. Plus, things like autonomic nervous system disorders or even certain medications can alter physiological responses, completely messing up the interpretation. So yeah, while these bodily changes happen, they are definitely not reliable, standalone tells of a lie.
Okay, so the polygraph is out as a magic bullet. What about the pump culture favorite? The single tell. You know, the eye flick, the nose rub, the crossed arms. What's the real truth about those? Because everyone seems to have their pet theory. My aunt swears if you scratch your nose while talking, you're definitely lying.
Sighs lightly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea that a single unique body language cue definitively signals lying is probably one of the most persistent myths out there. And it's simply not supported by scientific research, period. There is no universal lying body language. Findings across countless studies are incredibly inconsistent, weak, or non-existent. And probably the most popular of these myths are the eye-accessing cues that came out of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP.
Ah, yes, NLP.
Right. Proponents suggested that looking up and to the right indicated a lie, because you're supposedly visually constructing something new, while looking up and to the left signaled truth recall, accessing visual memory. There was even a belief it was reversed for left-handed people. It got quite specific.
Oh, I've definitely heard that one. People use it all the time trying to read someone in conversation, so it's totally bogus, like completely.
Rigorous scientific investigations have widely debunked these claims. There's just no consistent pattern whatsoever. It doesn't hold up under scrutiny. It's really an oversimplification of how the brain actually works.
Yeah.
Our complex cognitive processes, like recalling memories or constructing thoughts, aren't neatly mapped to specific eye directions like that. These processes involve intricate neural networks spread across the brain. They aren't localized in such a predictable, simplistic way. The real danger here is that these NLP IQ myths have been popularized through books, training seminars, even some law enforcement training, despite the complete lack of scientific backing. And this has unfortunately led to widespread misinterpretation and potentially very flawed judgments about people's truthfulness based on where they happen to glance. So, bottom line, forget the simplistic notion of single body language signs. Forget the magic tells. Scientifically sound deception detection is much, much more sophisticated than that. It's not about catching lies red-handed with some secret checklist. The core principles involve analyzing specific clusters of behaviors, not just one sign.
Clusters, okay.
Interpreting them within the relevant context of what's going on around them. And crucially, comparing them to an individual's established baseline behavior. How do they normally act when they're relaxed and truthful?
That makes so much more sense. It's like looking at a puzzle, isn't it? One single blue piece doesn't automatically mean the whole picture is just blue sky. But if you see several blue pieces fitting together, forming a distinct cloud shape, then you can start to infer that part of the scene probably involves the sky. No single data point confirms deception on its own. You need patterns and inconsistencies building up over time. A whole constellation of cues, not just one little twinkling star.
Okay, that definitely makes more sense than just looking for one twitch or glance. So if we're not looking for magic tells and polygraphs are mainly measuring stress, what is the smart way to become maybe not a lie detector, but a better deception understander? Our source gives us this fantastic framework: control, precision, and restraint. Could you unpack those for us? Absolutely. The first principle, control, is all about staying steady yourself. Don't let your own doubt or suspicion show on your face. And importantly, don't push too hard or make the person feel cornered or attacked. If they feel under attack, they'll likely shut down, become defensive, or maybe even start constructing better, more elaborate lies just to protect themselves. So choose the right moment and the right place. Talk somewhere they feel relatively safe and comfortable. Let the space be neutral, maybe even warm. When people feel relaxed, their guard tends to drop, and that's often when the truth or inconsistencies might slip through more easily. Next is precision. This means knowing exactly what you're trying to figure out. What's the specific question you have? Are you sensing maybe just an exaggeration? Or is there a significant gap in their story? Or do you suspect something is completely fabricated? Knowing the kind of potential deception you're exploring helps you ask much better, more focused questions and spot those subtle gaps or inconsistencies. It really hones your focus, preventing you from just vaguely fishing around or chasing shadows. And finally, restraint. This is probably the hardest one for most people. It means resisting that powerful urge to jump to conclusions or label someone too quickly. One odd reaction, one nervous fidget, doesn't automatically make someone a liar. Not at all. You've got to be willing to stay in that uncomfortable gray area, that uncertainty, maybe longer than you'd like. You're looking for patterns, not just isolated red flags. If someone is being deceptive, it'll usually show up in the inconsistencies that emerge over time and the way their story shifts or contradicts itself. There's no need to force anything. Just let their words and their nonverbals do the work. The truth, or the lack of it, often reveals itself when you simply stay present, pay close attention, and practice patience. It's about observing with clarity, patience, and a level head, and letting the truth, whatever it is, rise to the surface on its own.
Okay, so if we're not doing an interrogation, what is the right environment? We're definitely not setting up a police procedural with a harsh spotlight and 2 stiff chairs, are we?
Absolutely not. Think about it from their perspective. What would you do in that kind of situation? You probably either clam up completely or put on a performance, right? Neither of which helps you get any closer to understanding what's really going on. Instead, pick a spot that feels normal, natural, not staged. Somewhere quiet, comfortable, where they can hopefully relax a bit and maybe forget they're being scrutinized.
Like a coffee shop, maybe.
Yeah, maybe it's a walk in the park, maybe the casual chat over coffee, or just sitting side by side on a couch, watching something together. The key point is, it shouldn't feel like an interview or an interrogation. No spotlight, no pressure cooker atmosphere, just space for them to breathe. Keep the mood calm and natural. Don't be stiff or overly formal yourself. Let the conversation wander a bit initially. If you jump straight into the heavy, sensitive stuff, they'll likely tighten up immediately. Instead, maybe talk about small things at first, stuff that doesn't really matter. Let the conversation flow. Give them time to settle in. Remember, this isn't about tricking someone. It's about creating the kind of safe, low-pressure space where the truth feels easier to share, or where a lie might start to unravel under its own weight because it's harder to maintain when relaxed.
That's such a huge shift from what most people probably imagine. It's about creating a safe zone, a low-pressure environment. And our source, the Deception Detector Series, gives us 3 really crucial strategies for boosting our accuracy. Beyond just patience and setting the right scene, what are those?
Yeah, the very first principle, perhaps the most fundamental, is to suspend judgment. As an analyst, or just as a person trying to understand someone, your own pre-existing opinions or judgments about the subject can seriously negatively affect the outcome of your analysis.
Right, biases.
Yep.
Exactly. It can lead to negative profiling, seeing what you expect to see. It's absolutely essential to try and become open to the subject's ideas, their perspective, even their self-image, without imposing your own immediate judgment. If you decide they're a liar before they even open their mouth, you'll inevitably interpret everything they say and do through that biased lens. Second, and this is absolutely critical, is to establish a behavioral baseline. Before you even get to sensitive topics, you need to carefully observe the person's behavior when they're comfortable, relaxed, and likely being truthful. Maybe during casual, safe, easy parts of the conversation. This baselining involves analyzing aspects like their typical blink rate, how their lips usually move when they talk, their normal verbal patterns, shoulder posture, tone of voice, speech rhythm, basically how they act when they're just being themselves and not under pressure.
Yeah.
Baselining refers to observing a person's normal, typical behavior when they are not stressed or feeling defensive. Then later, during questioning or when discussing sensitive topics, any significant deviation from this established baseline might indicate deception, or at least heightened emotional significance or cognitive load related to that topic.
Ah, okay. So it's like creating a control sample for their normal, truthful behavior. It gives you a reference point. So if someone normally talks with their hands flying all over the place, and then suddenly their hands are clamped rigidly to their sides when you ask a specific tough question, that's a deviation from their baseline that's worth noting. And we actually had a classic famous example of this kind of deviation, right? Bill Clinton.
Indeed. The Bill Clinton example is often cited regarding shifts from baseline, particularly in his famous denial during the Monica Lewinsky scandal. "I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky." Now, Clinton typically, in his casual and public speech, used contractions, phrases like "I didn't" or "I wouldn't." It sounds more natural, more relaxed.
Yeah, like most people talk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in this incredibly high-stakes moment, under intense pressure, he shifted to the non-contracted form. Did not. This is a more formal, more rigid construction. This deviation, especially happening under stress, is something that often raises suspicion among deception experts. It's sometimes called a non-contracted denial. It can be a subconscious attempt to sound more emphatic, more truthful, or more authoritative. But it can also indicate increased cognitive effort. It also gives the brain just a fraction of an extra second to think, to inhibit the truth and construct the alternative. And while a fraction of a second might seem tiny to us for a superprocessor like the human brain, it's potentially enough time to calculate and formulate that believable lie.
Fascinating. So his brain might have needed that tiny extra beat to suppress the truth and build the lie, leading to that slightly elongated, more formal speech pattern. And then he said, "That woman." That's another classic indicator people point to, isn't it? Psychological distancing.
It is. Instead of using a more familiar or direct term like her or simply her name, Clinton used the phrase, "that woman." This creates both emotional and psychological distance between himself and the subject he's talking about. It's a phenomenon known as psychological distancing. Such distancing language is quite common in deceptive speech, possibly because liars instinctively, maybe subconsciously, try to detach themselves from the uncomfortable subject matter. It might help reduce feelings of guilt or manage the internal cognitive dissonance, the conflict between belief and behavior. In a way, his own body and language were potentially leaking clues about the internal struggle and the hidden truth. Okay, the third key strategy is to account for influencing factors. This is crucial. You have to recognize that no subject, no person you're talking to operates in a vacuum. Their behavior is constantly shaped by a complex interplay of internal and external influences. Things like the immediate context, their current stress levels, the environment they're in, their past experiences, their cultural background, even their basic physiological state. Are they hungry, tired, cold?
To ensure an accurate analysis, or even just a fair understanding, these factors must be identified, isolated where possible, and definitely accounted for during interpretation. You can't just ignore them.
Right. So if someone skipped breakfast and is running on fumes, or they're sleep deprived, or they know they're being watched or recorded, mislabeling a pause or a fidget as definite deception would be completely flawed. You have to factor in those new pressures. Like you said, if the room suddenly filled with uniformed officers, a person freezing or pausing isn't necessarily a sign of deception about what they were saying. It's a perfectly normal reaction to the sudden, powerful external influence of authority figures appearing.
Precisely. You even need to consider something as simple as the room temperature. It sounds minor, but it can matter. Cognitive load, the amount of mental effort someone is exerting, tends to increase in hot, uncomfortable temperatures. So they might seem more strained, but it doesn't mean they're lying. Also, cold temperatures can sometimes reduce pro-social behavior, making people seem a bit more reserved or less cooperative, even if they're being perfectly truthful. In cold temperatures, people might show more closed-off gestures like clasping their hands, crossing their legs, crossing their arms. While these are sometimes classified as defensive gestures in a cold room, they might simply mean the person is trying to keep warm or feel more comfortable. Context is key. And crucially, the interviewer's behavior, your own demeanor, your attitude, your projections, your opinions can significantly influence the outcome of the interaction and your analysis. If you, as the interviewer or listener, induce stress through your questioning style or your body language, it will almost automatically increase the subject's resistance and elevate both their nonverbal and verbal stress indicators.
This makes it incredibly difficult to discern whether seemingly deceptive behaviors are actually caused by deception, or if there's simply a reaction to the stress you inadvertently created.
Wow. So it's just as much about controlling your own reactions and the environment as it is about observing theirs. You don't want to create the very stress you're trying to accurately interpret. That makes perfect sense. In the end, it really sounds like it's about observing with clarity, patience, a level head, and a whole lot of contextual awareness, letting the truth or the patterns rise to the surface on their own. We've talked quite a bit about the effort involved in lying and the subtle ways it can manifest, but it also sounds like there are some pretty significant costs to the liar themselves. Which brings us back to the why. If it's so costly, all that mental effort, the potential for guilt, shame, anxiety, why do people keep doing it? Why bother?
You're hitting on a really crucial point there. And it's a paradox, isn't it? Despite the potent psychological costs and the potential long-term drawbacks we'll touch on, lying can offer immediate, tangible advantages in specific situations. That's the lure. It might help individuals avoid conflict, spare someone else's feelings, achieve quick goals, gain temporary social approval, or even maintain relationships, in the case of pro-social lies. In competitive settings like negotiations, lying is unfortunately frequently used as a strategic tool to gain an upper hand. And furthermore, those little white lies can smooth social interactions, help build broader social networks by facilitating politeness and avoiding unnecessary offense. These immediate rewards and perceived benefits often just outweigh the potential long-term risks in the heat of the moment, which helps explain why deception remains such a common human strategy despite its inherent psychological and relational costs. However, let's definitely turn our attention to those costs now, because they are substantial and shouldn't be underestimated. For the liar, the internal psychological burden can be immense. Guilt and shame are very common companions to dishonesty, often leading to a persistent state of anxiety and just general negative emotions. Over time, this can really chip away at one's self-esteem and sense of integrity. And there's even something fascinating called unethical amnesia.
Unethical amnesia. That sounds almost like a superpower for liars, but maybe a creepy one. What exactly is that?
It's quite fascinating, and yes, also a bit unsettling. Unethical amnesia is a phenomenon where fabricating stories about past misdeeds can actually impair the liar's memory of the actual events that occurred.
Seriously.
Yes. It's as if the brain, in an effort to maintain consistency with the lie and reduce cognitive dissonance, starts to actively overwrite or suppress the original truthful memory. The more you repeat a false narrative, the more it can become your brain's accepted version of reality, making it genuinely harder over time to recall the truth accurately. This internal effort involved in constructing and, importantly, maintaining falsehoods is a constant cognitive drain. It's like running a hidden, resource-heavy program in the background of your mind all the time. This ties back into that fabrication inflation we mentioned earlier, where liars can start genuinely believing their own exaggerations, partly because their memory is actively being reshaped by the very lies they tell.
Wow. So it's not just about the emotional discomfort fading away over time. The actual memory of what truly happened can literally get warped or even replaced. That's a really sobering thought.
Precisely. And this leads directly to another significant ripple effect: the erosion of trust in relationships. This is huge. Ongoing deception, when discovered, inevitably causes intense negative feelings like betrayal and anger in those who are lied to. When someone finds out they've been consistently misled, it can fundamentally harm, sometimes irreparably, the bonds of that relationship, possibly leading to its complete breakdown. Selfish lies, in particular, contribute to a breakdown of social cohesion and community trust. Honesty, conversely, is absolutely vital for building and maintaining healthy, enduring bonds. Trust is the bedrock of any meaningful connection, personal or professional, and lies act like a corrosive acid on that foundation. And beyond just the social and emotional impact, lying can significantly impair memory itself in specific ways. It can cause liars to forget crucial specifics of actual events, or even develop detailed false recollections, memories of things that never actually happened. This is memory distortion. Researchers sometimes differentiate between denial-induced forgetting, where someone actively tries to suppress a memory of a misdeed, leading to genuine difficulty recalling it later, and commission errors, where they actively create and then remember false details that never occurred, effectively filling in the blanks created by the lie.
So it's not just getting a fuzzy memory, it's an active misremembering, sometimes even inventing new facts out of thin air that conveniently support the lie.
Exactly. And crucially, the act of verbalizing a lie, actually speaking it out loud, seems to have a greater impact on memory distortion than just contemplating the lie silently. When you speak a lie aloud, it reinforces its encoding in your brain. It becomes a more concrete, active memory trace, further solidifying the false narrative and making it even harder for the original, truthful memory to resurface later. This makes lying a far more complex act than just speaking untrue words. It's potentially a brain-altering experience, reshaping memory itself.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, I think, because our definition of what even counts as a lie isn't universal, is it? Does culture play a significant role in how we perceive and maybe even accept deception?
Oh, absolutely. Culture plays a massive role. Cultural norms and values significantly influence how lying is perceived, understood, and even judged across different societies. The distinction between so-called individualistic cultures and collectivist cultures is particularly profound here. In collectivist cultures, where group harmony and interdependence are paramount, Think of many East Asian societies, for example, telling something that helps everyone get along or reach a shared goal might be viewed more acceptably, even if it deviates from the literal truth. Maintaining harmony is key.
Right. The group is more important than the individual's literal accuracy.
In many cases, yes. This means they might view lying differently in situations where people from cultures that highly value individual rights and personal honesty, like many Western societies, would see it as clearly wrong. For instance, some studies have shown that children in China and Canada often have quite different ideas about whether it's okay to lie if it helps a group versus if it just helps one individual person. These studies clearly highlight how much cultural context shapes our moral judgments about lying.
Wow, so what might be considered a blatant lie, totally unacceptable in one culture, could potentially be seen as perfectly acceptable, maybe even virtuous or polite, in another, depending on the context and motivation. That's mind-blowing. So a good lie versus a bad lie is actually a culturally relative concept.
It certainly can be, to a significant extent. Related to this, studies also suggest that in some cultures, like China, again, expressing modesty and humility is extremely important socially. This might mean people intentionally play down their successes or good qualities, even if it's not strictly accurate. They might say they did poorly on a test they aced, for example. Now, interestingly, adults in China often don't perceive these modesty-motivated misrepresentations as actual lies in the same way Westerners might. It's seen more as politeness or appropriate social conduct. However, children in China and adults in places like North America typically do classify these modesty statements as lies.
That difference right there really drives home how much cultural values can change what we even consider to be a lie in the first place, and whether we judge it as right or wrong. It completely shifts the framework of what we're even trying to detect or understand. It's such a crucial reminder that our own cultural lens deeply shapes our perceptions.
It's an absolute crucial point for anyone trying to accurately assess truthfulness across cultures. You have to be aware of these differences. Moreover, the way we communicate verbally is also deeply influenced by culture, and this plays a big role in how potential deception is interpreted. Research suggests that some cultures, often called high-context cultures, Korea is often cited as an example, rely heavily on nonverbal cues, shared understanding, tone of voice, and the overall situation to convey meaning. Meaning isn't just in the words. They might interpret unclear or ambiguous messages very differently from people in low-context cultures like the United States or Germany, which tend to prefer clear, direct, explicit communication.
Okay, so high context relies on the unspoken, low context wants it spelled out.
Basically, yes. An example of this is how Koreans, being from a high-context culture, might view unclear messages as less indicative of deception compared to how Americans might see them. In high-context cultures, people don't always need or expect everything to be said directly. They rely on that shared history, the relationship, body language, tone, the situation itself. A vague or indirect statement might not immediately trigger suspicion for them. They might assume there's an unspoken reason for the ambiguity, or perhaps the speaker is just trying to be polite or avoid confrontation. Americans, on the other hand, coming from a more low-context culture, generally prefer directness and explicitness. An unclear or vague statement is more likely to raise suspicions. They might wonder, why aren't they being straightforward? And this ambiguity itself could be perceived as a potential sign of evasiveness or dishonesty. Therefore, it is highly advisable, often absolutely crucial, to consider a person's cultural background when trying to assess their truthfulness, especially when dealing with ambiguous or indirect communication styles. Misinterpretations are very easy otherwise.
What an incredible journey we've been on. We've gone from the surprising, maybe even alarming ubiquity of lies to the complex neural choreography happening inside our brains when deception occurs. We've debunked some really pervasive pop culture myths about lie detection, and we've learned about a more nuanced, effective approach to understanding deception, focusing on that framework of control, precision, and restraint. So, what does this all mean for you, our listener, as you navigate your own conversations? Ultimately, I think understanding deception isn't about becoming some kind of human lie detector armed with a rigid checklist of tells. Not at all. It's really about becoming a better, perhaps more empathetic, and certainly more astute observer of humanity in all its complexity.
I agree. It's about tuning into those subtle cues, maybe of unease, hesitation, cognitive load, or emotional stress that could ripple through a person's behavior. These aren't necessarily direct lie signals, but they can indicate internal conflict or difficulty. The truth, or the core issue, often isn't just about what's being said, but perhaps why someone might be struggling to say it, or why they might feel the need to construct a narrative that deviates from objective reality.
It's about recognizing that physiological changes or behavioral shifts are often signs of that cognitive load or emotional conflict we talked about, not definitive proof of deliberate lying.
Right. So the next time you find yourself in a conversation where something feels maybe a bit off, instead of immediately jumping to look for tells or assuming deception, maybe try slowing down. Try consciously suspending your judgment for a moment and truly listen, not just to the words being spoken, but to the whole story a person is telling with their words, yes, but also with their body language, their tone of voice, and considering the entire context surrounding them. It's really about paying attention to all the puzzle pieces, isn't it? And noticing how they fit, or maybe where they don't quite fit, together. It's definitely a challenge requiring patience and awareness, but maybe a rewarding one for truly understanding others better. And hey, please don't lie, guys. It's generally better not to, unless you feel you absolutely have to. Just saying. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the brain's secrets and the art of true observation. We genuinely hope you gain some valuable insights today that might help you navigate the fascinating, sometimes tricky world of human interaction with a bit more understanding. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep deep diving into the fascinating world around us. Bye for now.